Hello, everybody. Christian Brim here with Core Group. Joining me without video is the not quite infamous internet star, Jeremy Dorn. Jeremy, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you? Thank you.
I am well, thank you. All right. So our today's topic is the most powerful number in your business. And you're probably wondering what that is, and we will get to it. There are a lot of powerful numbers. Prime numbers being one of them, irrational numbers. Those are all interesting. But when it comes to business and what do you need to focus on, there really is only one number. So just because Jeremy is not visible doesn't mean we don't get to look at him. There's his face. That's pretty much what he looks like most days. Sometimes he looks better, sometimes he looks worse, but this is a fair rendition. There's our email address if you have questions that you don't want to ask on the webinar. Today's session is being recorded and it will be posted on YouTube and other places. So if you have something you want to discuss offline that you do not want to be part of the interwebs, feel free to reach out to us. So let's start with the most important number in business, the labor efficiency ratio. A lot of people probably have not heard of this, the abbreviation LER. And if you don't hang around in accounting circles or finance circles, you probably haven't heard of it, but it's a pretty simple concept. It is gross profit divided by labor. It's kind of the reverse of thinking of what is your labor cost percentage. I don't think that's an unfamiliar term for most business owners. They have an idea of how much of their revenue is going to their labor expense. The gross profit, want to make sure we define that because don't want to assume people know what gross profit is. But gross profit is the revenue less the direct costs. So that is, your cost of materials to produce the good or service that your business makes, and any other direct costs, sometimes usually labor. When we compute the labor efficiency ratio, though, we exclude the direct labor in our calculation. So it's going to just be the direct costs associated with delivering your good or service. So in our business, professional service business, where we've got a ton of labor, Jeremy is so grossly overpaid, it's not even funny. Sorry, Jeremy. The only really true cost of goods sold that we have that comes off our revenue to compute gross profit is our software. Spend a lot of money on that, as you can imagine, not just the software that we use, but all of the security that goes into keeping your data safe. So we take the gross revenue, we take off our software cost, and that's our gross profit for this labor efficiency ratio calculation. I was revisiting what Greg Crabtree, author of Simple Numbers, and Vern Harnish, author of Scaling Up, who really have immortalized this concept of labor efficiency ratio. I was revisiting some of their comments, and one of the things that stood out that I thought was very profound as far as expressing this in terms of a ratio as opposed to a percentage, and is that it flips your mindset around labor being a cost. Okay, and as we go through and point out some of the ways we use labor efficiency ratio, that'll become more clear. But it's essentially how much, if I spend $1 on labor, and when I say labor, that's not just the gross pay, that's all of the benefits, that's all of the taxes, the payroll taxes associated with it. So it's all in the labor cost. How much, if I spend $1, how much in gross profit does that earn me, right? Jeremy, had you considered thinking about it in that terms as opposed to it just being a percentage?
No, I mean, I think it's always been like, what's my labor ratio, or not my labor ratio, but my labor percentage in terms of revenue and not taking out those direct costs. And ever since we've been talking about it, that I've known about it, the focus on the gross margin and flipping it around and actually making it, an investment up rather than a cost is
Right.
just super, super helpful when you're looking at a lot of different things when you're trying to grow a business profitably.
Well, and if you think about it in this environment where it is uber hard to find employees, right? In every business, every industry. It really is a fact that if I've got an empty seat, if I've got an empty truck, if I've got an empty spot on the line, I am losing money because I can't keep up with what I've got to do, right? And so it really flips it from labor as a cost, as labor is something to produce profit. I think, we've moved in the United States over the last 30, 40 years from a primarily industrial manufacturing to a service industry. But it doesn't really matter whether you're manufacturing or your distribution or your service, your technology. It doesn't really matter. It's what can you get out of your people? Because the people are the value, right? Yeah, you may have to buy equipment, you may have to invest in fixed assets, but at the end of the day, everybody's playing with the same things there. Everybody can go buy the same trucks, they can go buy same machinery. It's what can you get out of your people that makes a difference of how much profit you make.
And we're probably going to get into this later, but I think like when you talk about service businesses like us, for instance, figuring out what that capacity and what you can get out of people is very difficult, right? It's all based potentially on time, but when you're doing multiple things for multiple clients, it becomes even more hard. So what is the actual capacity there? So this actually flips it around to not worrying about figuring out what that capacity is. It kind of gives you a number to aim for as far as what you're trying to add to your gross profit when you need to hire people. And we're probably going to get to that later. But
well, no, and we are, but that's a great point, because then it doesn't become, we're not managing these people's time, right? Like, how much time are they taking for breaks, or, how many shifts they're working, et cetera, et cetera. It's what are you producing, right? I mean, what profit are you generating?
Well, we have, I've had conversations with employees here too. If you get, if they've got a certain amount of things to do in 40-hour work week, they're going to get that much done, right? Can they get more done? Is their efficiency still there left? Probably, but you don't know what that is. And this kind of helps you guide as far as hiring and stuff like that. So I think it's been super helpful for sure.
Well, and this next slide is, why does it matter? So the two use cases I like to compare it is looking at your labor efficiency in your own history. So what is your trend? I think we were looking at it yesterday, and in the last 6 months, we've raised our labor efficiency ratio 1/4 point. Does that sound right?
Somewhere in there. On the short term, ours is different because we've got to look at the 12-month rolling. So like it's not spread evenly, but in the short term, it's gone up. Yeah, it's probably
right. And so you can look and say, well, okay, we're trying X, Y, and Z. We're moving people around. We're doing some additional education. We got a new piece of equipment, whatever it is. And we look at the trend in our labor efficiency ratio. Does it reflect an increase in gross profit? Does the ratio get larger? It is as Vern Harnish says, this is the third item on here, is it is the #1 predictor of profitability. In other words, if your labor efficiency ratio is going up, your bottom line is going up. If it's not, it's not, right? The other use case there is to compare it to your industry. And this is so that your history, your business, you're kind of in a vacuum. You may just be perpetually bad, or you could be perpetually good, but until you look at your industry and compare it to what others' labor efficiency ratio is, you really don't have any context to, is my number good, right? I think I've got it on a later slide, but I think a baseline labor efficiency ratio is 2 to 1. So if you spend $100,000 in labor, it should generate $200,000 in gross profit. That's if you're not, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, then you've got work to do. Maybe you're overstaffed. Maybe you got the wrong people in there. There's a whole bunch of things that could be the answer to that question. But it tells you that if you're below 2, you got some work to do. 2 up to 3 may be good depending upon your industry. It just really depends, because it's not, a capital intensive business like manufacturing. Their labor efficiency ratio is generally going to be higher because they've got more invested in the physical plant and in the equipment. A service industry where there's not a lot of fixed capital, it's going to be lower towards the 2. But that's not to say you can't have a labor efficiency above 3, because if you're in a very high margin business like technology, you've developed an app, and when you add another customer, you don't have a lot of increase in costs. Well, you could definitely have a higher labor efficiency ratio than 3. Jeremy, you were going to say something, or were you not?
I felt like I was, and then I think I just lost it.
That's fine. That's fine. Fair enough.
Yes.
So there are some variations on this. So when people talk about the labor efficiency ratio, usually they're talking about the direct labor efficiency ratio. And so again, in our case, for our business, we have revenue, and then we have our software, and that takes us down to gross profit. And then the labor, so all of our professionals, Jeremy's salary and all of his team, and all the benefits and all the taxes, that is my labor cost. And that is the direct labor efficiency ratio, because it is the labor that is direct in producing the revenue. Okay. I don't want to confuse people. I mean, traditionally, when you're talking about in accounting, gross profit does include labor, direct labor. So typically you would say revenue minus cost of goods sold, which would be, your direct cost, your direct labor. But for labor efficiency ratio, we back out that direct labor so that we can compute it on just the gross profit without the direct labor. So that's kind of, it's kind of potentially confusing, but I don't want it to be. But the direct labor efficiency ratio is what most people are talking about. When I say 2 to 3, that's what I'm talking about. The next one that is probably for small businesses and entrepreneurs, this is not one that comes into play a lot. It's one we started tracking recently, in the last year or so, is management labor efficiency ratio. And so that could be the owner's salary if the owner is not involved in the direct production of the good or service. They truly are a administrative or management function. But in a larger organization, it could be the marketing. It could be the marketing, the head of marketing. It could be the head of finance. It could be the head of production. It's basically the top level management, and that ratio is gonna be a lot higher than your direct labor, usually 7 to 10. So for every dollar you spend on management labor, you should get 7 to 10 times return on gross profit. And when you think about that, that makes total sense, because they're not actually producing the work, right? Their contribution to the gross profit is more high level. It's more like, are all the pieces working together? Are we bringing in the right number of new business versus our capacity? are, all of those pricing questions, all of those management type functions have a proportionately higher impact on the gross profit. Jeremy, what do you think about the distinction there between those two?
Yeah, I think it's once you get to a certain level in business, and your business is big enough to kind of separate that stuff out, then it kind of makes sense to start looking at that stuff. A lot of times, if you're $1 or $2 million, maybe you probably don't have all that separation. So most things are direct labor. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense that the management would be between 7 and 10, for sure, because they're the ones in charge of making sure things are being done efficiently, and they're capturing as much value as they can.
Yeah, and as far as looking at that over time, you can look at the impact that having a leadership team. One of the questions is, well, like you said, you're $1 million, you're $2 million. Should I hire a CFO? Should I hire a chief marketing officer? Should I hire a client service director, or whatever it is in your business? That is a great question. But the labor efficiency ratio helps you determine, yes, I have the profit, the gross profit to justify it. One. And two, if I'm spending that money, is it making any difference over time? In other words, I don't want to hire somebody and it just, come off my bottom line. They should increase the gross profit. Another use case, I don't see it as often, is a sales and marketing labor efficiency ratio. And the only difference there is that it generally is related to the net growth, not the gross profit. So sales and marketing would be their labor costs. You would use that as the denominator, but the numerator would be the increase in revenue. So I'm ill prepared. I don't know what a good sales and marketing labor efficiency ratio is. So if anybody has that question, ping me and I'll be happy to research it and let you know. Just wanted to let you know that is a use case that it comes into play from time to time. And the last one I put on here was owner, because as I was preparing for this, I was thinking that, a lot of business owners struggle with this mini hat syndrome, right? And they are a chief cook and bottle washer and jack of all trades, and they do so many things in the business. And it's hard to determine whether they're doing the right thing. What is the limitation that they're putting on the business by doing everything? If I could hire somebody to just do this part of my job, or I could get somebody else to do this part of my job, what impact would that have on the business, right? In other words, it's another way of looking at what's your best and highest use as the owner. And this is usually for smaller businesses, but I'd say anywhere up to $3, $4, $5 million, it comes into play, because there's the owner's always at that size business is doing multiple things. And so you can use this labor efficiency for you as the owner to help you make those decisions about what you should and shouldn't be doing as an owner. Had you considered that, Jeremy? I'm springing this on you.
No, but it sounds very close to like the bridge between breaking out direct and management labor efficiency, because, if you're the owner, and I mean, some owners are client facing, deal a lot with clients, might consider themselves, 60% direct labor and 40% management. So that breakout would then kind of tell you how that is. But if you were a lot more management, you could also use that to delegate the direct tasks that you probably don't need to be doing, because like we said, the management should be 7 to 10. And if you can get $7 to $10 from yourself, a lot more than $2 or $3 in gross margin as direct, why wouldn't you be paying somebody else to do the direct stuff?
Yeah, and we've seen that in conversations with clients where and a lot of times the compensation of the owner is kind of arbitrary. Like they'll pick a number either because they say, well, you need to pay this much yourself for taxes, or they're taking out a certain amount based upon what they need at home. It's not necessarily the market rate, and that will distort. Like they'll either get a really good labor efficiency ratio because they, as the owner, are doing a lot of the work themselves, but it's not a real number, right? Because they're not paying themselves what they'd have to pay somebody else to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically getting a management labor efficiency ratio that's now a direct labor efficiency ratio, right, because you're doing all the work, right? Which is not the point. When you could scale yourself if you would get some of those direct costs off you and get them into somebody else's hands and be getting $2 or $3 an hour, or $2 or $3 for every dollar you spend for them.
Well, right, and if you put it back into that thought process of, if I spend $1, I should get $2 to $3 worth in gross profit. As the owner, you can sit there and say, okay, I do these 5 things in a week, right? And I'm like, if I could pay somebody $1 to do that, and they're going to make me $2 in gross profit, and I would have capacity to do something that's more valuable for the business, or I just don't have to work as much. I mean, whatever it is, I mean, that's a very useful tool to help make that decision.
For sure.
So how to use it? How do you use labor efficiency ratio? We've talked about several of them, but I think making hiring decisions is a key one. It's one we ran into last year where we hired somebody prematurely. Fortunately, it didn't work out with that employee, so we got rid of them very quickly after we brought them on. But we did not eat our own cooking. We did not go and look at that labor efficiency ratio and say, do we really need somebody? Because if that labor efficiency ratio is below 2, you don't need somebody. Now that's a hard pill to swallow, because oftentimes it feels like you're going 100 different directions and your employees are going in 100 different directions, and there's fires that be put out, and it just doesn't seem like there's enough time to get everything done, which may be true. It may mean you have other problems. You may have pricing problems. You may have systems problems, et cetera, et cetera. But the end result is, if the labor efficiency ratio is below 2, you don't need to be hiring anybody. You need to figure out how to get more done with the people that you have.
Yeah, I think that's the whole key to this thing, right? Like, if you stick to this, I'm not hiring under 2, because if you're hiring under 2, you're basically saying, I'm just going to finance whatever growth I have that I'm hopefully going to get, but you're just financing inefficient growth. And if you're financing inefficient growth, if you're losing money and you're growing, all you're going to do is lose more money, right? Like,
make it up on volume, right?
Yeah, like,
that's my favorite line.
You can't make up those losses on volume. So if you've got to make it up on efficiency and get that above 2, and I think, what's his name, Crabtree, calls it running hot. And then once it's running hot and you're above 2, then you start looking at hiring, and it's obviously going to drop down for a second as you fill that capacity. But if you're not being efficient in what you're doing, hiring more people to sell or to create more inefficient work is not going to make you any more money. It's probably going to give you a bigger headache than anything.
Well, yeah, you nailed it. What you're doing is you're subsidizing bad business decisions. I mentioned a couple. It could be that you're not charging enough. It could be that you are working with the wrong customers or clients. It could be that you don't have good systems about how you do things.
You could have wrong people in the wrong seats. You could have wrong seats.
100, yeah, right.
All that stuff, right?
All of that. But all you're doing in hiring is subsidizing those bad behaviors, if you will. So looking at the other case of managing employees. So, here's where I had that: B players give you 2, A players give you 3. If you start thinking about it in terms of that, and in this labor market, it's kind of hard because it's just hard to get people. But if you can get somebody that's good, that'll make you 2, versus you get somebody that's great that make you $3, 50% more, you're not going to have to pay them 50% more money. I mean, that you're just not, but they're a lot harder to find, and it takes a lot more effort to get there. But in managing employees, when you're saying if they're in the right person, right seat, it's hard to get a labor efficiency ratio computation by an employee, but you might be able to. You might be able to do it by department, some smaller slice of the pie to do some comparison. But when you're comparing employees to this labor efficiency ratio, you can have that's a great conversation to say. You want to raise this year of $10,000. Great. Show me how you can make me $30,000. Because that's how you get that raise. As a business owner, I'd be like, all day long, I would love to pay you another $10,000 if you brought me in $30,000 or even $20,000 in gross profit all day long. So it becomes a useful tool in actually managing your employees.
Yeah.
Last item on here is the predicting investment results, and this kind of goes back to comparing your trend. Are you making the right decisions in your business? But if you're hiring a new employee, for instance, you have a very clear idea of what that gross profit increase should be, and the time frame. I mean, it should be a relatively short period of time, 3, 6, not any more than 12 months. And so if you hire that person and you're looking at that labor efficiency ratio, and the first quarter it didn't move, and the second quarter it didn't move, you got a problem. You probably need to pull the plug after the first quarter. Maybe you made the wrong hire. Maybe your assumptions were wrong. Maybe you had this empty seat. You thought you've got excess work, and if I just had somebody to do the work, great. But maybe I got the right person in there, and the work just isn't there. I mean, I thought it was there, but it's not. So having that as a investment projection, it's like this is what should happen. This is what financially it should look like when I make this decision. Does that make sense, Jeremy?
Absolutely. This kind of goes back to what we talked about in the last webcast, which was budgeting is worthless, right? So like this is forecasting. This is one of those tools that can help you forecast what it's going to look like when you bring on somebody new, and what you should be generating with somebody new, for sure. It's just a really simple, once you get into it, it's a really simple concept. Now, the things like we've talked about that of why it might be low or how you can fix it are plentiful, but
that's all the problems of a business, right? I mean,
sure. Yeah.
It could be any of them or all of them.
All at the same time.
Exactly.
True story.
Which is always difficult, because then you don't know where to start or what, Anyway, all right. So I'm going to open the floor to questions and answers. There's a Q&A box. Feel free to drop us a question. We'll answer it live. I'm also going to advance the slide so we can see Jeremy's face again. And I mean, who doesn't want to look at Jeremy? Right. Our emails again, if you want to reach out and ask a question that comes up on labor efficiency, I'd be very happy to help walk through that calculation, Jeremy, or I, either one, with your business, and even pull some industry standards for you so that you can compare and have some context for that. So drop us a line. We'd be happy to help with that calculation. Jeremy, do you have any closing thoughts?
No. This labor efficiency thing, I don't remember when we started talking about it, a year ago, 9 months ago, or whatever it was. And reading that Crabtree Numbers 2.0 book was just like, whoa, never thought of it that way. So it's just so simple. Like, you always think of this stuff as having to be very complicated, but it's literally just picking a number, having a target, and sticking to it. And then figuring out how to increase it and everything else is the difficult stuff. But the concept itself is just fantastic.
And you hit on a good point. It's simple, but it's not easy. And I think I think one of the things that really business owners struggle with is they make it complicated. It doesn't have to be complicated, the solution or the problem. Because if you got it simple, if you simplified it down to this is the real problem in the business, that doesn't mean it's easy to fix.
No.
But you got to get clarity on what the issue is to fix first. And it's usually very simple, like you said.
We at Core love to overcomplicate stuff. So I think that's just a business thing. People just love to overcomplicate. Like, I guess it's human nature. We just overcomplicate it to start off with. And I think once you start simplifying stuff just always becomes a lot more clear. But
yes, very much true. All right. I won't tell you to wait for the camera because you can't be seen. Wait, stand by. All right. So Gwen says thank you. And thank you, Gwen. And I'll wave until the camera is off. You guys have an awesome day.